Hello, my friend. In this video, I'm going to show you my super simple bus or group mixing technique. This way you can have tighter and better sounding mixes that are a bit louder and more cohesive as a whole. And also you have a simple framework that you can follow every time that you want to do bus or group mixing before you're about to master and export out your project. This is super useful because you'll be spending less time mixing since you'll have a reliable framework to depend on, and you'll impress your fans, labels, or anyone you send your music to since it's going to sound a little bit tighter and more polished. And thankfully, there are only 3 steps to doing this. First, you're going to want to group your tracks or route them to a bus channel. Then you're going to want to add in your bus effects chain, which I'm going to show you in this tutorial here. And then third, it's important that you don't just slap on an effects chain and then just use it. It's important to have it on there, disable each plugin, and then slowly turn each one on and tweak it a little bit as you move through the effects chain and enable your bus processing. So if you'd like to grab the effects chain and all the effects chains that I use, there'll be a link in the description below to a Patreon that you can sign up for. And also, if you would like a completely free song finishing checklist, there's a link in the description as well. It's a 5-step song finishing checklist that I've used to release hundreds of songs to this point, and I know you'll find it valuable too. So with that said, grab your free goodies and let's jump into this video.
So now that we are in Ableton Live, we are in a project here. It's a collab I did with a really cool artist named Ponder, my buddy Sam. We've been working on this for a little while and it's pretty sweet. So we'll start by just listening to kind of the main drop to get a vibe for the track that we're working with here. So it's a cool kind of deep lo-fi house kind of track that we'll be working with. And so let's just kind of dive into this. So one of the first steps that I would do in this process is basically just group a couple of elements together. And the way I usually do it is I'll group together the bass elements. So I have a sub track and then a track that's handling kind of like the more lower mids that gives kind of the vibe of the bass. So kind of group those together. Another one I usually group together is the drums. I usually choose to have the kick included in the drums. I know some people might have a low end bus or a low end group instead. This is just kind of the way I prefer to do it. And this group here just has all of the drums in it. And then another one that I'll usually do is all the instruments. So any kind of synth sounds, leads, I usually throw vocals in here as well. That's the way that I'm kind of doing it. There's a couple of different ways that you can do it as well. In addition to separating out the low end from the drums, you can also have the vocals on a separate group or bus as well if you'd like. I prefer, right now at least, just throwing them all in an instruments track. And then also, you can also have a separate group or bus for all the effects, stuff like crashes and lasers and little ambient noises and stuff like that. For some reason, I'm not entirely sure why, but I usually leave it outside of a group and don't do any bus processing on that. It's just something that I've been doing. I'm not sure if you want to do it that way as well, but you can also group together all of the effects tracks. So then essentially, once you have completed the first step, which is putting all of these particular elements into their own groups or buses, then we're going to get into the actual processing. So generally, we'll open up one of these. This is kind of the general chain that I run. Start off with a glue compressor that's kind of catching some of the peaks and doing some very light compression. Then we're going into a tape saturation. I'll open that up. I'm using this one here that I like quite a bit, the soft tube tape. Just kind of adding a bit of grit and kind of a little bit saturating the signal a bit, kind of gluing it together even further. Then using this kind of special magic plugin, the Oxford Inflator, which I learned about on a Disclosure live stream. Again, kind of saturating things and doing some like a little bit of magic to the overall group. And then running it through a little bit of EQ, just getting rid of some of the low end. Sometimes I'll get rid of some of the high end on the group bus as well. Sometimes do kind of surgical stuff, but usually I try to keep it very simple. Something that I've been doing, this is a little bit new that I've been doing, but then running it into a clipper. So the idea is to shave off some of the transients. So that way you're able to bring the RMS value up as opposed to having like the true peak value taking up a bunch of the headroom in the overall mix, which allows you to then increase the volume of the overall like loudness of your track. Still kind of learning about this, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. It's kind of a newer thing that I've been learning as I'm trying to get better at club masters. But the idea is normally I wouldn't have this, and then we're usually running it into a limiter, just kind of bring up the volume a bit, and then again kind of cutting off some of the peaks. So what we'll do is we'll listen to this, and I'm going to jump over to the drum bus. You can see it's more or less the same chain that I'll use, as well as on the instrument rack. You can see it's the same chain. There's something, a redux here for effects, but it's really the same chain running through compressor, tape saturation, inflator, EQ, clipping, and then limiting. And for the purpose of this, let's listen to the drum bus with it on and off. So this is with it on, and then off. On. Off. So obviously one of the biggest things is there's a very large volume difference, but also if you can listen and hear, everything sounds a little bit more glued together a little bit, and then also more present. I feel like a bit of more highs are coming through and everything just sounds a little bit more in your face. But so usually what I would do in this kind of example is I'll throw this kind of little rack that I built. So I've created something called the drum bus here. And whenever I throw it on, it'll have all of these individual units disabled. And then I'll bring them in one by one, doing some fine tweaking. And so I'll kind of show you what that process is like right now, so you can kind of do something similar. So starting off with the glue compressor, turn that on. And usually the threshold is all the way down. And what I'll usually do is just drag down the threshold until I see like around like 2 to 3 decibels of gain reduction happening. So just kind of show you what that looks like. Something around there, which is pretty light, is usually what I would go for. And I usually don't play around with the attack or release too much, just kind of keep it at these settings. Then moving on to the tape. So then I would turn this on and then open it up. And usually I would play with the amount up until it's about just kind of kissing the red. In this example, I feel like this is a little too crunchy, so I dialed it back a little bit. So you kind of want to use your eyes and ears. And then for this particular plugin, they have the A, B, and C types, so I'll usually just cycle through them. I think I usually end up using B or C, but I'll just play through them so you can kind of have a listen. B, C, A. I think C has like this nice high end, so I might actually leave it on the C. So that's that. Then we'll turn on the Oxford inflator. And then for this one's kind of a weird plugin. The idea is like usually looking to see some of like the input hitting in the yellow a bit, and then playing with the effect and the curve to kind of just go for a pleasing sound essentially. Something around there, kind of going for subtlety. Because I think if you could hear it, the more that you push these up, you can hear a bit more almost saturation and like more crispiness in the high end. So just trying to kind of balance that out. Then in terms of the EQ, there's some low end here, so I'm only cutting at around 30 hertz. But if we go over to the instrument rack, you can see here, kind of cutting out a bunch of the low end. So that way the kick and the sub is taking up most of that. Did a little bit of surgical stuff, getting rid of that like area around 250, 300, which can sometimes kind of sound, boxy and nasally and muddy. And then also just shaving off a little bit of the high end to the 16K mark. In terms of the drums, left it all wide open, which is fine. In this instance, again, I'll just quickly go through the clipping idea. But what I've been learning from this is You start it off at 0, 0, you link it, and then what you do is you listen back and slowly increase the input until you kind of hear it kind of breaking up, and then dial it back a bit, unlink it, and then bring up the output to 0. So we'll go ahead and listen to that. Ooh. Something like that. Still learning that one a little bit, but it definitely does add like quite a bit of loudness. And then lastly, the color limiter, which is just dialing, trying to get around a similar amount of gain reduction, like around 2 or 3 decibels, nothing too crazy. And the idea is you just turn it on, dial back the ceiling until you're kind of seeing it there. And using your ears to make sure it's not sounding too messy. For something like that, it's not too much because the clipper is adding quite a bit of volume. That's generally the process. So then I would do that for each and every single one of these buses. And then over on the master, which I won't get into today, it has a similar chain. And then that way when you're running all this into the mastering chain, you've kind of already reduced the dynamic range a little bit, and then also built up the volume a bunch. So that way when you are running through a mastering train, you don't need to go as intense. You can again keep with subtlety, and then that's what I go for here. So the idea is to do bus mixing like this, glue each individual elements together, increase the volume as well in a nice pleasing way, and then run into the mastering chain so that you can glue everything together as a whole as well.
So now you should have a solid idea of how you can go about doing group processing or bus processing, however you want to call it, and have a nice framework that you can follow every time that you want to do it. As you can hear here, everything sounds a little bit more cohesive and a little bit more balanced and a little bit louder as well when you do group bus processing. And it's something that I like to try to get to before I'm about to head to the mastering stage so that I can export my songs and my demos as quickly as possible. If you want to get your bus processing done a little bit quicker, there'll be a link below to a Patreon where you can sign up and get all the effects chains that I use, including the group processing one that we were going over in this video today. And also don't forget to grab your free 5-step song finishing checklist that you can find in the link in the description below. It's what I've used to finish countless songs, and I know it'll help you just as much as it'll help me, because the more songs that you can make, the more releases that you will have available that you can put out there, and the more releases that you put out, the more opportunities that you have for your music to blow up and all the good things that you want to happen. It all starts with music, so you need to be finishing as much music as possible. So with that said, hopefully you found this video useful. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff if you did, and I'll see you in the next video, my friend. Have a good one.